Bridgerton Season 4 kicks off with merriment at the Bridgerton household as Lady Violet Bridgerton, in full Mama Bear mode, prepares for her daughter's return from Scotland and the introduction of the new little Lord Featherington, Colin and Penelope's adorable son. However, the domestic bliss is interrupted when Violet realizes her second-born, Benedict, is once again avoiding his family duties. She eventually tracks Benedict down in a scandalous state, finding him in bed with two women. This earns him a lecture on how his ungentlemanly behavior could stain the family name, before his younger sisters even have a chance to secure suitable matches. Benedict, of course, is unbothered. He argues that his sister's prospects should be judged by Anthony's actions, not his, since he's merely the second-born, albeit one who occasionally signs family documents without fully understanding them. Despite his defiance, Violet convinces him to at least attend the first ball of the season, which she is hosting, and to be on time, a compromise he reluctantly agrees to. Life hasn't exactly become any easier for Penelope, now that her secret is out. Though the Queen pardoned her, she has turned Penelope into her personal form of entertainment. Penelope is summoned to read her gossip to the Queen before they are even published, a promotion that feels more like a gilded cage. Thankfully, Colin is right by her side, helping his wife navigate the discomfort of the Queen's new obsession with her pen. The season's first big event is a masked ball that introduces us to the formidable Lady Araminta Penwood and her two daughters, Posy and Rosamund. Araminta is a twice-widowed social climber who might possibly be a husband killer, and she has already set her sights on Benedict as the ultimate prize for one of her girls. Benedict is officially the hot man of the season, and despite arriving late, he is immediately swarmed by hopeful debutantes. Yet the only person who truly captures his attention is a mysterious young woman in silver named Sophie. Clearly out of her element and far more interested in the decor than the marriage market, Sophie nearly gets cornered by an overeager bachelor until Benedict steps in after noticing her discomfort. When he suggests a dance, she admits she doesn't know how. Benedict offers to teach her, and the two escape the crowded ballroom to find a private moment away from the swarming debutantes. The Queen, who has been scouting for a male diamond since she is tired of the usual female, spots Benedict running off with every lady's eyes following him and decides Benedict is her chosen focus. Despite Penelope's best efforts to redirect her, the Queen doubles down, even placing a wager with Penelope that the elusive Bridgerton will officially marry by the end of the year. In their stolen moment, Benedict realizes Sophie is unlike anyone he has ever met. She isn't fawning over his title. In fact, she didn't even know he was a Bridgerton. She poignantly points out that other girls act the way they do because they have been raised solely to be chosen. Their connection is cut short by the midnight bell, signaling it's time for masks to come off. Before the big reveal, Sophie gives Benedict a kiss and flees, leaving behind a single silver glove. On her way out, she bumps into a furious Lady Araminta, who remains unaware of the girl's identity. By the end of the night, we learn Sophie is actually a servant for the Penwood household, who snuck out with the help of the staff to experience one night of magic. Now she is back to her reality of tending to Araminta and her daughters, while Benedict begins a desperate search for the mysterious lady who stole his heart and left him with nothing but a glove. While Sophie was preparing Araminta's daughters for the big night, the wicked Rosamund faked losing her mask just to force Sophie into a last-minute panic of crafting a replacement. Once the mask was finished, Rosamund miraculously found her original, accusing Sophie of sabotage. But the moment the carriage pulled away, Sophie was left alone with her dreams of one magical night, which was where the real MVPs, the footman and the head cook, stepped in. They convinced Sophie to attend the ball, and since she had already embroidered a stunning silver mask, she just needed the outfit to match. The footman scoured the house and found a dress belonging to the late Lord Richard Penwood's sister. For the finishing touch, they borrowed Araminta's brand new silver shoes. Sophie was terrified of being caught, but the footman reassured her that the matriarch has so many shoes she wouldn't possibly notice a single pair being worn for a few hours. In the present, Lady Violet Bridgerton is on a warpath to marry off both Benedict and Eloise. Eloise is convinced that the men of London have zero interest in her, but Violet forces her to test a theory. Just smile. The moment Eloise flashes a grin, the suitors are practically waving green flags, much to her horror. Benedict swoops in to rescue her by offering to be her chaperone, a move Violet happily accepts so she can spend more time flirting with Lady Danbury's brother, Marcus. However, Benedict's kindness is purely transactional. He strikes a deal with Eloise. If she helps him find the mysterious lady in silver, he will protect her from having to talk to any men, keeping their mother off her back. Eloise takes Benedict straight to the source of all information, Penelope. Benedict wants Penelope to use her Lady Whistledown powers to find the Silver Lady, but he realizes he has almost no information to give. They can't even describe her too specifically, because a lot of people saw Benedict and the mystery girl running off for a private moment. To reveal her identity now would be a slap to her honor and ruin her standing in society forever. Instead, they decide on a tactical approach. Whistledown prints that a wayward second-born son is ready to settle down and is actively looking for a wife. Benedict's plan is to meet as many women as possible, using the portraits he has been drawing to try and recognize the visible parts of the lady in silver's face. As expected, the news causes a total frenzy. Every eligible lady in town swarms Benedict, including the wicked Rosamund Penwood, because who else is the wayward second-born son? While Rosamund's sister Posy is actually a nice young lady who treats Sophie with respect, Rosamund is purely obsessed with the status of becoming a Bridgerton. When Rosamund finally gets her moment with Benedict, he realizes almost immediately that she is not his mystery girl and discards her. Her morale hits rock bottom, but her mother Araminta isn't giving up. She assures her daughter that men are fickle and that Rosamund just needs to apply more pressure to make Benedict hers. Aside from Benedict trying to find the lady through the women in the society, he also forces Eloise to play detective. He deliberately leaves her stranded amongst groups of eager suitors, forcing her to actually engage in conversation. Eloise ends up awkwardly asking these men if they have sisters who specifically don't know how to dance, hoping to stumble upon a lid. After a string of unsuccessful balls, the secret finally blows up when Lady Violet Bridgerton reads the latest Whistledown issue. Even though Penelope was careful not to name names, Violet isn't easily fooled. She corners Penelope and essentially threatens her until the truth comes out. Violet then confronts Benedict, hurt that her own son didn't share such a huge romantic development with her, especially since seeing him settle down has been her long-term dream. The game changer happens when Benedict finally shows his mother the silver glove. While Benedict and his siblings completely missed it, Violet immediately spots the Penwood insignia. She remembers that the Penwood matriarch from years ago was obsessed with embroidering the family crest into all their gloves. Benedict is confused because he already spoke to Rosamund and knows she wasn't the one, but Violet encourages him to go to the house anyway, suggesting the mystery lady could be a family friend or a guest. When Benedict arrives at the Penwood estate, he finds himself speaking with Posy. Even though the wicked Rosamund thinks it's ridiculous that Benedict would be interested in her sister, Benedict is genuinely kind to Posy. He sits and listens to her wild imaginations and stories, though he quickly realizes she isn't the woman from the ball. Sophie is standing right there at the door, watching the man she loves search for her. The footman, who knows the truth, practically begs her to open the door and reveal herself, pointing out that Benedict is clearly looking for her. Despite the encouragement, Sophie is paralyzed by her own insecurity. She watches Benedict and convinces herself that he isn't looking for her, the maid who scrubs floors and takes orders, but the fake noble lady who appeared at the ball in silver silks and lace. However, while Benedict is questioning Posy about what she wore to the masquerade, his casual mention of a silver dress sends alarm bells ringing in Lady Araminta's head. She suddenly remembers bumping into a mysterious lady in silver that very night, and as Benedict leaves, the sight of the Penwood insignia on the glove confirms her worst fears. Araminta immediately pieces it all together and accuses Sophie of sneaking out in her new shoes. She had already noticed a mark on them that morning and told Sophie to clean them, but she never imagined her maid had actually worn them to the Bridgerton ball. She asks Sophie to try on the shoes, and since they are a perfect fit, the jig is up. Araminta has the audacity to accuse Sophie of being ungrateful for all the kindness she's been shown, but Sophie finally snaps back, questioning exactly what kindness that was after years of being treated like a slave. The truth behind their history is even uglier than it looks. Years ago, when Araminta arrived to marry Sophie's father, the late Richard Gunningworth, Earl of Penwood, the cook told Sophie not to call the Earl her dad. The Earl also introduced Sophie only as his ward, which I assume is because she's an illegitimate kid. But Araminta caught the drift and was immediately angry. Few years later, Araminta would not let Sophie do dance classes with her kids. And even though her dad promised to take care of her, when her dad died, Araminta told her that her dad left Sophie nothing in the will, which is most likely a lie, and could also explain why she housed Sophie for years, even though her evil way would have kicked her out. She also told Sophie her mother was a mistress that got pregnant for her dad, which is why the dad could not claim Sophie as his child. Now Araminta kicks her out for good, vowing that Sophie will never find work again in the city. Before Sophie is cast out, the other staff members and even the kind-hearted Posy pull together whatever money and jewelry they can to help her survive. Benedict, having given up on finding this mystery person, with Eloise even jealous that Benedict was about to leave her alone in this whole we are not going to get married thing, ends up at a party where he witnesses 3 men attempting to assault a maid. Sophie bravely jumps in to protect her fellow worker, and when the men turn on her, Benedict leaps into action. Benedict rough-handles the attackers and forces an apology, though the man firing Sophie on the spot proves just how precarious her situation is. Sophie is stunned to see him and accidentally calls him by name, sparking Benedict's curiosity. He wonders how a stranger knows him, but she quickly covers, saying she simply heard his name passed around. Even though the silver dress is gone, Benedict insists on helping her find a job, and refuses to let a young lady walk the dangerous roads alone at night. As they head back toward the city, Benedict is struck by an overwhelming sense of familiarity. He can feel in his soul that he knows this person, yet Sophie remains steadfast, insisting they have never met. While the search for the lady in silver continues in the streets, a much more intimate battle is being waged within the palace walls. The long-standing friendship between Lady Danbury and the Queen has hit a freezing point, and it all started at Lady Bridgerton's ball. Lady Danbury made the heartfelt request to leave the Queen's service to return to her hometown, a place she hasn't seen since she was 4 years old, but the Queen's response was a flat and icy no. Things have become incredibly tense as the Queen continues to insist that Lady Danbury cannot leave. In protest, Lady Danbury has stopped her visits to the palace altogether, leaving the Queen in a state of deep depression. Even the once thrilling private readings of Lady Whistledown's latest gossip fail to bring a smile to her face. Seeing the monarch crumble, her loyal secretary Brimsley takes it upon himself to intervene. He approaches Lady Danbury, explaining that while she hasn't officially offended the crown, she needs to be the one to bridge the gap because the Queen is truly struggling and trusts no one else. Lady Danbury eventually agrees to return to the palace, but the reunion quickly turns back into a fight. The Queen retreats behind her royal title, calling Lady Danbury a subject who must respect the wishes of her monarch. It is a harsh reminder of the power dynamic that usually stays hidden beneath their friendship, and it sends Lady Danbury walking out yet again. However, the royal mask finally slips as Lady Danbury reaches the door. The Queen breaks down in tears, offering a rare and vulnerable apology. She confesses that her refusal isn't about power or subjects, but about pure, terrifying loneliness. With the King's health failing, she admits she has no idea how she will cope when her husband eventually dies if she doesn't have her best friend by her side. The journey back to London takes an unexpected detour when a heavy rain cuts their travel short. Benedict suggests they take shelter for the night at a Bridgerton cottage, but, in a comedic twist, he doesn't have the keys and the house is empty. Sophie, showing off the resourcefulness only a life of service can provide, saves the day by sneaking through a window and unlocking the door from the inside. The night takes a serious turn when Benedict's macho act finally crumbles. While he earlier insisted he was fine, the injuries he sustained while protecting Sophie from her attackers have become painfully infected. As he begins to groan in agony in the middle of the night, Sophie rushes to his side to tend to his wounds. In his feverish delirium, Benedict begins to hallucinate, confusing Sophie with the lady in silver and even begging her for a kiss. Despite the emotional pull, Sophie keeps her composure and nurses him through the night. By morning, the situation becomes scandalous by Bridgerton standards when the caretakers, the Crabtrees, discover a shirtless Benedict and a strange woman in the same room. Mrs. Crabtree immediately assumes the role of a strict chaperone, refusing to let them leave until Benedict is fully healed. This forced stay gives Sophie her first taste of true leisure. At breakfast, Benedict is fascinated watching her devour her meal with a real appetite, and later, he watches amusingly from the window as a bored Sophie, unable to sit still, starts pulling weeds in the garden, accidentally staining her borrowed dress. While trapped together, the pair begins to bond over Benedict's unfinished art. He has a habit of leaving his sketches incomplete, but Sophie hypes him up, reminding him that even Michelangelo had to start somewhere. When Benedict starts asking questions about her background, Sophie attempts to leave but reaches for a book first. Benedict points out that it is written in French, a language a maid isn't expected to know, only for Sophie to shock him by speaking it fluently. She even mocks his own French pronunciation, leaving him deeply curious about this maid, who possesses the intellect and spirit of a noblewoman. Their time at the cottage isn't all serious study. They venture outside to fly a childhood kite, a rare moment of pure joy where Benedict encourages Sophie to finally let go of her worries. However, the playfulness takes a steamy turn when Sophie wanders the grounds later and happens upon Benedict swimming in the lake. Instead of being embarrassed, Benedict teases her for spying, and the playful banter finally dissolves into a passionate, long-awaited kiss by the water. Their fairy tale is shattered by Mrs. Crabtrees, who points out the power dynamic between them. As a maid, Sophie technically cannot refuse him, which makes his advances feel inappropriate to him upon reflection. Realizing the potential unfairness of his actions, Benedict apologizes for the kiss and insists that they both forget it ever happened. As they continue their journey to London, the shift in Sophie is heartbreaking. She reverts to her maid persona, closing off the spirited woman Benedict had just spent days getting to know. When he asks her for the alternate route to London she had mentioned earlier, She refuses to provide it, stating that it is not her place as a maid to offer directions to a gentleman. Back in London, things are far less romantic because the maid wars are in full swing, sparked by none other than the vengeful Lady Araminta. After Sophie's departure, Araminta began aggressively poaching staff with enticing offers like massive salary raises, which has triggered a citywide crisis. People are losing their loyal help left and right as domestic workers finally begin to realize their true worth. Varley, the Featheringtons' longtime maid of 20 years, decides it is time to ask for a raise, but Lady Portia Featherington tries to play the tough finances card, claiming the family simply cannot afford an increase. Instead of actual money, she offers Varley her old clothes, only to immediately turn around and spend a fortune on brand new outfits for herself. The elite have long used a manipulative technique to keep their staff loyal, constantly talking about family, and suggesting that family doesn't discuss money. However, Varley has finally had enough of the hypocrisy. She makes it perfectly clear that after 2 decades, she knows she isn't family, she is an employee. When Portia bluffs and tells Varley she is free to go, Varley calls her on it and actually quits, which is most likely going to cause problems for the Featheringtons later on. Francesca Bridgerton is growing increasingly anxious over the fact that she and her husband, John Sterling, have not yet conceived. During a candid discussion, John mentions that a woman's chances of pregnancy might be helped if she achieves her pinnacle, the height of physical pleasure during intimacy. When he asks if she has ever reached it, Francesca finds herself lying to him and saying yes, though the conversation clearly leaves her confused. Seeking clarity, Francesca heads out for a double date with the newlyweds, Colin and Penelope. The contrast is immediate and a bit overwhelming. The two are so head over heels that they can't keep their hands off each other, even making out in the carriage before they arrive. Seeing their intense physical connection makes Francesca realize that something is missing in her own marriage to John. Desperate for answers, she turns to her mother, Lady Violet, to ask what exactly a pinnacle is. The question gives Violet a hilarious sense of déjà vu, reminding her of the time she completely failed to explain the mechanics of sex to Daphne. Even now, Violet's explanation is a bit vague and doesn't quite click for Francesca. Refusing to ask John for further details, she circles back to Penelope, who finally explains that it is the highest level of pleasure a person can feel. The meeting is interrupted by Eloise, who is starting to feel a bit pushed aside now that her friends are married and having conversations she isn't yet a part of. Interestingly, the talk about pinnacles and pleasure has a surprising effect on Lady Violet herself. It gives her the courage she needs to finally give Marcus, Lady Danbury's brother, a real chance. She opens up to him about her fears, explaining how shy she feels since she hasn't been with another man since her husband died decades ago. Marcus handles the moment with grace, listening to her every word before simply telling her that he wants her. The two finally share an incredibly sweet kiss, proving that romance isn't just for the young debutantes. Lady Danbury is still plotting her exit, but she has realized the true reason why the Queen won't let her go. The Queen is lonely. Most of the women currently serving as her ladies-in-waiting are people the Queen doesn't actually connect with or like. Lady Danbury has now made it her personal mission to find a replacement, a lady-in-waiting who actually has the wit and personality to keep the Queen company. She knows that if she can find someone the Queen truly likes, she might finally be granted her freedom to return to her childhood home. After their intimate time in the country, Benedict brings Sophie back to London but ends up stopping at the Bridgerton house, as this is the only home he has been able to secure her employment. This leaves Sophie absolutely mortified, and she immediately attempts to leave. However, Benedict reveals that none of the places he wrote to agreed to employ her because all their wives were against it, all courtesy of Lady Araminta's smear campaign. With no other choice, Sophie accepts the position and is tasked with tending to Eloise and Hyacinth. She is immediately mesmerized by the sheer number of staff and the high-end equipment at the Bridgerton house, which is a huge step up from her previous life. When the other staff ask why she finds it all so fascinating, she explains that her previous household had very few employees, meaning she had to do almost every job herself, whereas here, every task is designated to a different person. Benedict proves his loyalty early on by protecting her when Violet asks about her previous workplace or anyone who can vouch for her character, keeping her secret safe from the family. The entire episode serves as a chemistry burner between Sophie and Benedict. They find themselves constantly crossing paths in the hallways, exchanging charged looks that say more than words ever could. There are several near kisses, particularly during a quiet moment of stargazing and an intimate scene where Sophie helps Benedict with his shirt. Even though Benedict is falling for the maid in his house, he hasn't forgotten the woman from the ball. Mrs. Crabtree had advised him not to treat the lady in silver like one of his paintings, which he usually dumps halfway through, so he has decided to officially continue his search. As the Bridgerton ladies discuss the mystery, Alice offers to take up the search herself, hoping to finally unmask the woman in the silver dress. Now we know Lady Danbury has been looking for a lady-in-wait for the Queen, and so far she has been eyeing Alice. Alice is audacious, outspoken, and exactly the kind of spirited personality the queen needs. However, the guilt of trapping Alice in a life of royal service weighs heavily on Lady Danbury. She seeks advice from Lady Violet, who is currently planning a steamy session with Marcus. Violet, mostly trying to convince herself to be bold in her own love life, goes on a rant about how they must live for themselves and be sometimes selfish, which Lady Danbury takes to heart. When Alice supposedly finds the lady in silver, Danbury takes her straight to the queen, who has been eager for any news. It turns out the queen and Lady Danbury had a bit of a deal. Once Alice is presented, the queen agrees to take her on as her new lady-in-waiting, and Alice doesn't find being ambushed funny at all. Ultimately, Lady Danbury helps her see the bigger picture. Alice realizes she could be a true friend to the queen, and her anger quickly shifts to excitement at the prospect of her new life at the palace. Even so, the queen isn't letting Lady Danbury go quite yet, as she continues to summon her for games, keeping her old friend close while she warms up to the new one. Unlike Eloise, who remains firmly against the marriage mart and all its rigid etiquette, young Hyacinth actually finds herself wanting a match. She tries to bond with Eloise by suggesting they read a book together, but Eloise quickly dismisses the choice as subpar literature. When Sophie reveals she is familiar with the book, Eloise becomes instantly fascinated by her new maid's intellect. Sophie mentions other books she has read, leading Eloise to gush about how knowledgeable she is, which naturally sparks Lady Violet's interest. When questioned about how a maid learned to read so well, Sophie carefully lies, claiming she picked it up by listening in on lessons while her previous employer's children were being tutored. She also reveals she is an orphan and avoids discussing her past, causing Violet to feel a deep empathy for her. Violet even offers her permanent employment, noting how much the girls already adore her. The hunt for the lady in silver seems to reach a conclusion when a supposed candidate arrives with her mother. She is a delightful young woman, and while Benedict is initially fascinated, he finds himself subconsciously looking for Sophie in her. He asks her if she speaks French, and while she does, it becomes clear she wasn't actually the woman at the ball. The entire meeting is ruined when Sophie enters to serve tea. Benedict is so distracted by her presence, feeling as though he is somehow cheating on her by even entertaining another lady, that he flinches, causing Sophie to accidentally pour hot tea all over him. Frustrated by the constant proximity and the green light that can never lead to a real future, Sophie finally snaps. She has decided to stay at the Bridgerton house permanently and needs to protect her professional life. She begs Benedict to leave her alone and pursue a match with someone of his own social standing, even questioning why he is always underfoot at his mother's house instead of living in his own bachelor lodgings. Feeling dejected and realizing he is making her life impossible, Benedict decides to head to his own cottage to create some much-needed distance. He isn't alone for long, though, as Lady Violet tracks him down to his bachelor pad. She assumes he left because the hunt for the lady in silver didn't pan out, and she advises him to leave the fantasy behind. She tells him that the spark he felt for the mysterious lady doesn't just happen once in a lifetime. He simply needs to be open-minded enough to find that same connection in another person. Once his mother leaves, Benedict has a moment of clarity. He realizes he doesn't need to look for a new spark, because he has already found it with Sophie. He's even been painting her in secret. Realizing that a fantasy is nothing compared to the woman currently living in his family home, he abandons his solitude and heads straight back to the Bridgerton household to follow his heart. Lady Violet had asked Francesca to host a family gathering at the Sterling estate to draw all the siblings away, while she conveniently lies about being sick just to spend a scandalous and wonderful night with Marcus. With the staff also given the night off, the Bridgerton house is supposed to be empty. Benedict arrives home to find the halls quiet, but fate intervenes when Sophie realizes she has forgotten her wallet. She rushes back inside only to literally collide with Benedict on the stairs. The chemistry we've been waiting for finally explodes, and it is all ungentlemanly dalliances right there on the staircase. I was genuinely worried someone would walk in, because doing that on the stairs is absolutely wild. However, just as things are heating up, Benedict manages to ruin the entire vibe by asking Sophie to be his mistress. His friends have been talking about how they can't always marry for love, so they make the women they truly care about their mistresses, a path one of his friends just took. Sophie, having much more self-respect than Benedict gave her credit for, is not having it. All that high-voltage tension vanishes instantly as she shuts him down and walks away to join the rest of the staff at the tavern for a much-needed night out. Francesca finally decides to be honest with John. She comes clean about the fact that she has never actually reached her pinnacle, and John handles it like a gentleman, asking her never to fake it with him again, and insists they stop worrying so much about producing heirs, and instead focus on enjoying each other's company. They agree to be more affectionate and lovey-dovey too, but all that might be messed up by Michaela, who has just returned. She might be struggling to find that pinnacle with John, because she is actually gay. The biggest shocker of the mid-season finale, however, comes from the neighborhood gossip the staff have been whispering about. A new family has just moved in next door to the Bridgertons, and it is none other than the villainous Lady Araminta and her daughters. But wait, it gets even messier. The staff's new hire is Varley, the longtime Featherington maid who quit during the Maid Wars.